Imagine this. You're driving down a busy highway late for work, coffee sloshing in the cup holder because some jerk just cut you off. Your phone's buzzing with notifications, your boss, your mom, that group chat you muted, but somehow it's still going off. The radio's blaring about the latest crisis gas prices, politics, something about a storm coming. Your heart's racing, your grip on the wheel tightens, and all you can think is, why is everything always such a mess? Sound familiar? That's life in 2025 America, right? Chaos around every corner, and it feels like there's no off-ramp. But what if I told you there's a way to stay calm, even when the world's losing its mind? That's what we're here for today on the Stoic Road, finding calm in a crazy world. Buckle up, because this story's about a guy named Jake, and trust me, he's been where you are. Jake was your average 30-something dude living in a mid-sized American city. Think strip malls, traffic jams, and too many fast food options. He had a decent job at a tech startup, a small apartment with a leaky faucet he kept meaning to fix, and a habit of scrolling X way too late at night. Life wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. It was just loud. Bills piled up, deadlines loomed, and every day felt like a race he couldn't win. Then came the day that broke him. It started with a text from his boss at 7 a.m. Need that report by noon. No excuses. Jake groaned, rolled out of bed, and tripped over a pair of sneakers he'd left out. By 8, he was stuck in traffic, watching the minutes tick by. At 9, his car started making a weird noise, great, another expense. By 10, he was at his desk, chugging stale office coffee, when his phone lit up again. His girlfriend Sarah was mad because he'd forgotten date night again. And then the kicker. At 11, his computer crashed, taking half the report with it. Jake stared at the blank screen, feeling the heat rise in his chest. He wanted to scream, punch something, or just walk out and never come back. Instead, he sat there frozen, drowning in the chaos. That night, Jake slumped onto his couch, a beer in one hand and his phone in the other. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for, just something to make sense of the dumpster fire that was his day. That's when he stumbled across a quote on X. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It was from some old Roman guy named Marcus Aurelius. Jake didn't know much about Romans beyond gladiator movies, but those words hit him like a brick. Power over his mind? He barely had power over his Wi-Fi signal. But something about it stuck. He scrolled more, found a thread about Stoicism, and fell down a rabbit hole that would change everything. Here's the deal with Stoicism: it's not some dusty philosophy for toga-wearing weirdos. It's a practical toolkit for surviving a world that's always trying to knock you down. Marcus Aurelius? He wasn't just some random dude. He was an emperor dealing with wars, plagues, and betrayal. Yet he stayed cool as a cucumber. Then there's Seneca, a writer who faced exile and death threats, and Epictetus, a former slave who turned his suffering into wisdom. These guys lived over 2,000 years ago, but their ideas? They're like GPS for navigating the madness of today: traffic, jams, toxic group chats, and all. Jake wasn't sold yet, though. He thought, okay, sounds nice, but how's this supposed to help me when my car's dying and my boss is breathing down my neck? Fair question. So let's walk through Jake's first step on the Stoic Road, figuring out what he could actually control. The Stoics have this killer idea: split everything into two buckets. Stuff you can control and stuff you can't. Your thoughts, your actions, your attitude, that's your turf. The weather, other people's opinions, random car troubles. Not your circus, not your monkeys. Jake decided to test it. Next morning, he woke up to rain pouring, windshield wipers on full blast rain. His car still sounded like a dying lawnmower, and the report deadline was still noon. Old Jake would have freaked out, cursing the sky and his luck. New Jake? He took a breath and thought, what can I control here? He couldn't stop the rain or magically fix his car, but he could leave early, grab a coffee, and rewrite that report. So he did. Traffic sucked, sure, but he popped. In a podcast, not mine sadly yet, and kept his cool. At work, he banged out the report by 11:45, sent it off, and even had time to text Sarah an apology with a promise to make it up to her. Was it a perfect day? Nope. Did he feel like he'd won a small battle? You bet. That's the Stoic secret. It's not about fixing the world, it's about fixing how you deal with it. Jake started small, but he was hooked. He wanted more of that calm, that clarity. And that's where his real journey began, a road we're going to travel together in this story. Because if Jake can find peace in his crazy world, maybe you can too. So there Jake was, a guy who'd just survived a trash fire day without losing his mind. For the first time in forever, he felt a flicker of something, control, maybe, hope. Whatever it was, he wanted more. That night, after his surprisingly okay day, he cracked open his laptop and typed Stoicism into the search bar. He wasn't ready to buy a bunch of old books or anything, but he figured there had to be something online, podcasts, videos, X threads, that could break this down for a regular dude like him. And oh man, did he find it. Turns out Stoicism wasn't just some ancient buzzword. It was a whole way of living, and people were still raving about it in 2025. Jake stumbled across a quote from Epictetus. "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Simple, right? But it hit him hard. All this time, he'd been reacting to life like a piñata getting whacked, flailing, stressed, mad at everything. What if he could just not? He kept digging and found this idea called the dichotomy of control, fancy name, basic concept. The Stoics said you've got to focus on what's in your power and let go of the rest. Jake thought about his car trouble. Could he control the weird noise? Nope. Could he control how he handled it saving up? Calling a mechanic, not letting it ruin his day? Yeah, he could. It was like a light bulb went off. The next week, Jake decided to put this Stoic stuff to the test. Monday rolled around, and his startup's office was buzzing with drama. A big client had pulled out of a deal, and everyone was freaking out. His boss was yelling. His coworker was panic Googling competitors, and the break room coffee machine picked that day to die. Chaos, right? Old Jake would have jumped into the mess, griping about how unfair it all was. New Jake? He sat at his desk, took a deep breath, and asked himself, what can I control here? He couldn't bring the client back or fix the coffee machine, but he could nail his own work and stay chill while everyone else melted down. So he did. By the end of the day, his boss even noticed, threw him a rare "good job, man" as he left. Small win. Big vibe. That night, Jake cracked a beer and scrolled X again, this time on purpose. He found a Stoic challenge. Negative visualization. Sounds weird, huh? It's this trick where you imagine the worst-case scenario, not to freak yourself out, but to get ready for it. Seneca, that Roman writer guy, was big on this. He'd picture losing his wealth, his home, even his life, so when tough stuff happened, he wasn't blindsided. Jake gave it a shot. He closed his eyes and pictured his car finally giving up, leaving him stranded. He imagined the tow truck, the repair bill, the hassle. Then he thought, okay, what would I do? He'd call the AAA, figure out a ride, maybe even laugh about it later. Weirdly, it made him feel lighter-like. If he could handle that in his head, the real thing wouldn't be so bad. Tuesday, he tried it for real. His car didn't die, yet, but Sarah texted him about a fight she'd had with her sister. Normally, Jake would have gotten sucked in, playing therapist or picking sides, stressing himself out over something that wasn't his deal. This time, he pictured the worst Sarah being mad at him for not fixing it. Then he thought, what's in my control? He could listen, be there, but he couldn't solve their drama. So he texted back, "That sucks, babe. Want to talk about it?" She did. He listened, and guess what? No blow-up, no stress. Just a solid night with takeout and a movie. Stoicism. Chaos, 0. By Wednesday, Jake was feeling cocky. He dodged a few bullets, kept his cool. What could go wrong? Famous last words. That afternoon, his boss called an emergency meeting. The client fallout was worse than they'd thought. Layoffs were on the table. The room went silent, then erupted. People were yelling, crying, texting their spouses. Jake's stomach dropped. This wasn't a leaky faucet or a missed date. This was his paycheck, his rent, his whole life. He felt that old panic creeping in, the kind that makes you want to bolt or hide under your desk. But then he remembered Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. He couldn't stop layoffs, but he could decide how to face them. Jake sat there breathing slow while his coworkers spiraled. He thought, okay, worst case, I lose the job. What then? He'd update his resume, hit up his network, maybe even take that coding course he'd been putting off. It wouldn't be fun, but it wouldn't be the end of the world either. By the time the meeting ended, no layoffs yet, just cuts to hours. Jake wasn't a wreck like everyone else. He was okay. Not thrilled, but steady. And that's when he knew. This Stoic thing wasn't just a trick. It was a lifeline. That week, Jake started journaling, nothing fancy, just a notebook he'd had lying around. He'd write down what stressed him out, what he could control and what he couldn't. It was like unloading a backpack full of rocks every night. He even started timing it 5 minutes before bed, done. The more he did it, the more he saw patterns. Traffic? Not his fault. Sarah's moods? Not his to fix. His own attitude? All him. It was simple, but it was working. Jake was still a regular. Guy car still rattled, rent still loomed, but he was starting to feel like the driver, not the passenger on this crazy road called life. Jake was riding high, or at least higher than usual. A week of Stoic experiments had him feeling like he'd cracked some secret code to life. Traffic jams, no sweat. Office drama, handled. He was journaling, visualizing, keeping his cool. But, you know how it goes, life doesn't let you chill for too long. By Friday, the universe decided to throw Jake a curveball, and this one wasn't messing around. It started with the car. That rattling noise he'd been ignoring, it turned into a full-on clunk-clunk screech on his way home from work. He pulled over to the side of the highway, hazard lights blinking, as semis roared past. The tow truck guy took one look and said, "Yeah, buddy, this one's toast, transmission's shot." Jake's stomach sank. The repair bill was going to be a grand minimum money he didn't have lying around. He sat in the tow truck, staring out at the rainy dusk, feeling that old panic clawing back. I can't afford this, I'm screwed. But then he caught himself. Epictetus popped into his head. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it. Okay, fine. He couldn't fix the car right there, but he could choose not to spiral. He took a breath, called Sarah to pick him up, and started thinking. Savings were tight, but he could scrape by, maybe sell some old video games, pick up a freelance gig. By the time Sarah pulled up, he wasn't a mess. He was annoyed, sure, but alive. She raised an eyebrow. You're weirdly calm about this. Jake just shrugged. Guess I'm trying something new. That weekend, though, the real test hit. Saturday night, he and Sarah were supposed to have a chill date, pizza, a movie, the works. But when he got to her place, she was pacing, eyes red. Her sister had called, and they'd had another blowout, something about money and old family baggage. Sarah unloaded it all on Jake, the yelling, the guilt trips, how she felt stuck in the middle. Then she turned to him and snapped, "You're never around when I need you. You're always at work or dealing with your own crap." Ouch. That stung. Jake felt the heat rise. His instinct was to fire back, defend himself, turn it into a shouting match. Old Jake would have done it in a heartbeat. Instead, he paused. Marcus Aurelius whispered in his ear, "If it's endurable, then endure it. Don't complain." Was this fight endurable? Yeah, it sucked, but it wasn't the end of the world. He looked at Sarah, her face tight with frustration, and thought, what can I control? He couldn't fix her family drama or rewind the week. But he could listen, really listen. So he sat down, grabbed her hand, and said, "I'm here now. Tell me what's going on." She blinked, surprised, then let it all out, tears, rants, the whole mess. By the end, she was calmer, and they salvaged the night with cold pizza and a quiet hug. No screaming match, no storming out. Progress. Sunday, Jake woke up with a new Stoic idea rattling around. Amor fati. It's Latin for love your fate, and it's this wild concept from the Stoics, especially Marcus and Nietzsche, who ran with it later. The gist? Don't just accept what happens, embrace it, love it, even the ugly stuff. Jake sat on his couch, carless, replaying the week. Dead transmission, fight with Sarah, job cuts looming. Could he love that? Not like, yay, I'm broke, more like, this is my life and I'm not gonna let it break me. He grabbed his journal and wrote, car's gone. Cool. Teaches me I don't need it as much as I thought. Sarah's mad. Fine. Shows me how to be there better. Weirdly, it worked. He felt tougher, like he was turning life's punches into push-ups. Monday, he took the bus to work first time in years. It was packed, late, and smelled like wet socks. Old Jake would have hated every second. New Jake? He thought. Amor fati. Baby. He pulled out his phone, read a Seneca quote he'd saved. What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears. Dark, sure, but it made him smirk. If life's a mess for everyone, why waste energy whining? He got to work, chipped away at his tasks, and even laughed with a coworker about the bus ordeal. Small stuff, big shift. Then came the deepest cut. Tuesday night, scrolling X, he saw a post that stopped him cold. Memento mori, remember, you'll die. It's another Stoic gem. Think about death, not to be morbid, but to wake up. Jake put his phone down and stared at the ceiling. He wasn't old, but he wasn't immortal either. What if the car crash had been worse? What if those job cuts hit him next month? He imagined it, not in a panic, but clear-eyed. One day, all of it would be gone. His leaky faucet, Sarah's laugh, the stupid office coffee, gone. It wasn't depressing, it was electric. If life's short, why waste it freaking out over a transmission? Why not call Sarah and say, I love you, instead of waiting for the perfect moment? Why not grind harder at work, not for the paycheck, but to build something real? Jake grabbed his journal and scribbled, I'm alive today, that's enough. He slept better that night than he had in months. By midweek, Jake wasn't just surviving, he was steering. The car was still dead, Sarah was still a work in progress. But he was different. Stoicism wasn't fixing his problems, it was fixing him. And that's when he knew. This road wasn't a quick fix, it was a long haul, and he was just getting started. Jake was starting to feel like he had this Stoic thing figured out. Sure, his car was kaput, and Sarah wasn't exactly throwing him a parade, but he was handling it, amor fati style, loving the mess, and memento mori, keeping him grounded. He was journaling like a champ, breathing through stress, even cracking a smile on the sweaty bus ride to work. Life wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. Then, just when he thought he'd found his footing, the rug got yanked out from under him. It was Thursday, a gray, dreary day that matched the vibe at the office. The startup had been limping along since the client pulled out, and rumors of layoffs had been swirling. Jake walked in, coffee in hand, ready to grind through another day, when his boss called everyone into the conference room. No preamble, no sugarcoating. We're cutting staff, half the team's gone, effective today. Jake's name was on the list. 10 minutes later, he was packing a cardboard box laptop charger, a stress ball, a half-dead plant while his coworkers shuffled, out shell-shocked. He didn't even get a handshake, just a good luck man from the HR lady. By noon, he was on the bus home, unemployed. Panic hit fast. Rent was due in a week. His savings were a joke, barely enough for the car repair, let alone months without a paycheck. He stared out the bus window, mind racing. What now? How do I tell Sarah? Am I going to end up crashing on my buddy's couch? The old Jake would have spiraled, cursing the company, the economy, himself. But this Jake had a Stoic toolkit. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and typed, "Lost my job. Can't control that. Can control what I do next." It didn't fix the problem, but it stopped the free fall. When he got home, he sat on his couch, box of office junk at his feet, and dug into what the Stoics called virtue, their big idea about living well no matter what. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it." Simple but heavy. Jake thought, okay, what's right here? Freaking out wouldn't pay the bills. Neither would blaming his boss or the universe. What was right was getting up, dusting off, and figuring out a plan. He grabbed his laptop, not the work one, his own beat-up relic, and started updating his resume. No wallowing. Action. That night, he told Sarah. She came over, pizza in hand, expecting him to be a wreck. Instead, he was calm, tense, sure, but not broken. "I got laid off," he said, slicing into the pepperoni. "Sucks, but I'll figure it out." She stared at him. "Who are you, and what did you do with Jake?" He laughed, then explained the Stoic stuff, how he couldn't control the job loss, but he could control his hustle. She nodded, impressed. "You're kinda badass now." It wasn't a fix, but it was a lifeline. They ate, watched a dumb comedy, and for a few hours the world didn't feel so heavy. Friday, Jake hit the ground running. He applied to JobStack gigs, remote stuff, even a random warehouse posting. He texted buddies from college, asking about openings. He wasn't above swallowing. His pride, survival trumped ego. Then he stumbled across another Stoic gem, community. The Stoics weren't lone wolves. They believed in helping others, being part of something bigger. Seneca said, "We are members of one great body." Jake thought about his co-workers, half of them. We're in the same boat now. So he shot a group text. "Anyone want to meet up? Figure this out together?" 3 said yes. Saturday, they grabbed coffee at a diner. Jake, his old desk neighbor Mia, and 2 guys from sales, Tim and Carlos. Everyone was stressed, but Jake took the lead. "Look, we're screwed, but we're not dead. What can we do?" Mia had a lead on a freelance project. Tim knew a guy at a rival company. They pooled ideas, swapped contacts, even laughed about the office coffee machine's tragic end. Jake realized something. Helping them felt as good as helping himself. By the end, they had a plan: split the freelance gig, polish their LinkedIn profiles, lean on each other. It wasn't a job, but it was momentum. Sunday, Jake sat with his journal, reflecting. Losing the job still stung. Bills loomed. Uncertainty gnawed, but he wasn't drowning. He wrote, "Virtue's keeping me straight, community's keeping me sane." He thought about memento mori again. Life's short, yeah, but it's also wide. This wasn't the end. It was a detour. He even circled back to amor fati, loving this mess. Maybe the layoff was a shove to something better, a chance to ditch a job he'd never loved and build something real. It was a stretch, but he was starting to buy it. Monday, he got a small freelance gig from Mia's contact. It wasn't much, but it was cash, a start. He worked from home, no bus, no boss, just him and his hustle. That night he cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta, and called Sarah. "I'm okay," he said, meaning it. She smiled through the phone. "I know." Jake wasn't rich, wasn't fixed, but he was standing. The Stoic road wasn't easy, but it was his. And for the first time, he felt like he could walk it anywhere, job or no job, car or no car. Jake was finding his rhythm. The freelance gig was paying a few bills, his old coworkers were turning into a tight crew, and Sarah was starting to call him Mr. Stoic without rolling her eyes. He wasn't back to where he'd been: stable job, working car, but he was moving forward, one deliberate step at a time. The Stoic road was bumpy, but he was walking it. Then, just when he thought he'd seen the worst, life tossed him one more test, a big one. It was a Tuesday, mid-morning. Jake was hammering out some freelance code when his chest tightened. Not like stress tight, more like someone was squeezing his ribs. Then came the dizziness, a cold sweat. He dropped his laptop, stumbled to the couch, and thought, "Am I having a heart attack at 32? No way." But the fear was real. He called Sarah, voice shaky. "I don't feel right, can you come over?" She was there in 15 minutes, pale but steady, and drove him to urgent care. The wait was brutal, 2 hours of bad fluorescent lights and worse coffee, his mind spinning. What if this is it? The doc came back with tests. Not a heart attack, thank God. Panic attack, maybe, mixed with dehydration and too much cheap ramen. "Take it easy, drink water, see a GP if it happens again," she said. Jake nodded, relieved but rattled. Sarah squeezed his hand on the way out. "You scared me, you idiot." He managed a weak laugh. Yeah, me too. Back home, he crashed on the couch, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't a car breakdown or a layoff. This was his body saying, hey, you're not invincible. And that's when Memento Mori hit different. He'd toyed with remember you'll die before, kept it abstract, motivational. Now it was raw. He could have died today. Maybe not, but it felt close enough. Marcus Aurelius wrote, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Jake grabbed his journal, hands still shaky, and scribbled, I'm here. That's it. What matters? Not the freelance deadline, not the car he couldn't afford to fix. Sarah mattered. His friends mattered. Doing something good with whatever time he had, that mattered. The next day he woke up sore but alive. He drank water, actual water, not coffee for once. Called his mom just to say hi and texted the crew. I'm okay, just freaked out yesterday. Thanks for being there. Mia shot back, dude, don't die on us. We need you. Tim added, yeah. Who's gonna organize the diner meetups? It wasn't much, but it was everything. Seneca's one great body idea clicked community wasn't just nice, it was survival. Jake decided to double down. He offered to help Mia with her next freelance pitch free of charge. Virtue, right? Doing what's good, no strings attached. By Friday, he was back at it, coding, hustling, living. The health scare lingered, but he flipped it with amor fati. Love your fate, even the shaky parts. Maybe this was a wake-up call: eat better, sleep more, stop pretending he could run on fumes. He cooked a real meal: chicken, veggies, no ramen, and invited Sarah over. She noticed the change. You're different, she said, fork in hand. Less frantic. He shrugged. Trying to love the mess, I guess. She smiled. I could get used to this, Jake. Saturday, he sat down to journal, tying it all together. The Stoic road wasn't about dodging life's punches. It was about taking them and standing anyway. The dichotomy of control kept him sane. Car, job, health out of his hands. His choices? All his. Negative visualization prepped him for the worst. Amor fati made him embrace it. Memento Mori lit a fire under him. Virtue and community held him up. He wrote, lost a lot this month, gained more. I'm not fixed, but I'm free. Sunday, he took a walk, first time in weeks he'd left the apartment without a mission. No bus, no rush, just air and quiet. He passed a guy fixing a beat-up car, kids laughing in a yard, a couple arguing on a porch. Life, messy and loud, just like his. He thought about Marcus Aurelius scribbling in a war tent, or Epictetus limping through slavery with a grin. They didn't have it easy either, but they found calm. Jake wasn't there yet, not emperor-level chill, but he was closer than he'd ever been. Back home, he pulled up X, typed a post. Stoicism's not a cure, it's a compass. Lost my job, my car, almost my mind. Still here. Thanks, dead Romans. A few likes rolled in, then a reply. Dude, same, how do you start? Jake grinned. Maybe he wasn't alone on this road. Maybe he could share it. That's Jake's story. So far. A regular guy in a crazy world finding his way with some old school wisdom. If he can do it, you can too. That's what the Daily Stoic Mindset is all about: real stories, real tools, real calm. Hit that subscribe button, because next time, we're diving into another tale of grit and grace. How do you stay steady when life's a storm? Stick around, and let's figure it out together. See you on the road.